Good day. Happy Mantra Monday. It's Akayani, and I have made this video ahead of time because it wasn't possible for me to be with you live and in person. So I hope that you accept my apologies of not being able to be with you live, because I enjoy that, having your association. But I wanted to keep my word and have this available for you. Today, when you're going to watch this, it's going to be Monday, January 27th, 2020. I also want to take a moment to apologize for the delay in uploading last week's video, because I promised that there would be content on Mondays. The internet was incredibly slow. It took me about 3 days to get it uploaded, but it is uploaded now. I will include a link in this description here, so you can go ahead and watch that at your leisure. Okay, so today I'm continuing on in the chapter 5, which is called Karma Yoga. This is action, the action of a self-realized person, specifically the action of a self-realized person executing the principles of bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is specifically related to Krishna, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes I see that people try and substitute other things, but that is actually not correct, because this is transcendental. This is knowledge that can actually take you beyond samsara, or beyond birth and death. And as such, there's actually practical guidelines on how to be able to do that. I'm not interested in giving people pie in the sky, because we live here on earth now, and we have to interact with each other and strangers, family, acquaintances, co-workers on a daily basis. And so the purpose of Mantra Monday is to help brighten your week and give you some clues and some tips and some insight based on the ancient devotional wisdom originating in what we call India, to help you along your way. So today I'm going to be reading to you from chapter 5, verse 23. This is in the same chapter called Karma Yoga, or action in Krishna consciousness, action in Bhakti Yoga. What does the self-realized person actually do? What does it really mean? So the Sanskrit first, then the transliteration, word for word, synonyms. Then I'll read the whole thing. Then I'll read the Siddhanta, or the purport, and then try and offer any small realizations or insights. Okay, you ready? Here we go. śaknotīhaiva soḍhuṁ prāk śarīra-vimokṣaṇāt kāma-krodhodbhavaṁ vegaṁ yuktaḥ sukhī naraḥ. Again. śaknotīhaiva soḍhuṁ prāk śarīra-vimokṣaṇāt kāma-krodhodbhavaṁ vegaṁ yuktaḥ sukhī naraḥ. The word for word translation. Śaknoti is able. Ihaiva, in the present body. Ya, one who. Soḍhuṁ, to tolerate. Prāk, before. Śarīra, the body. Vimokṣaṇāt, giving up. Kāma, desire. Krodha, and anger. Bhavam, generated from. Vegaṁ, urges. Saha, he, yuktaḥ, in trance. Saha, he, sukhī, happy. Naraḥ, human being. The word for the complete translation is, before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and he is happy in this world. The purport. If one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. There are the forces of talk, forces of anger, forces of the mind, forces of the stomach, forces of the genitals, and forces of the tongue. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called Goswami or Swami. Go means senses and Swami means master, so you become a master of your own senses. Such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up the material body. One who can do this is understood to be self-realized and thus is happy in the state of self-realization. It is the duty of the transcendentalist to try strenuously to control desire and anger. So what I like about this verse is that it's talking about the here and now. It's talking about our current situation, our present circumstances. And what is that? That is our soul, the person who is driving the body that you are inhabiting, that I am inhabiting, has different forces acting upon it. So this is something that we want to try and get a grip on, something that we want to try and control. So we're not simply being pushed around by different urges. So the different urges that are mentioned here are talk, anger, the mind, the stomach, the genitals, and the tongue. So if we can control these different things, then we can actually be situated in happiness, because we are not the slave of these different forces at work. Now, what comes to mind is, for example, the forces of the tongue. We all like to talk. Sometimes we like to gossip. Sometimes we like to criticize others and put other people down. We may not even have anything constructive to say, but we want to talk anyway. So we can get ourselves in hot water with this urge just to speak for the sake of speaking. You can offend someone, hurt someone's feelings, get yourself in trouble at work, all kinds of things. Say things that are untrue. So the adage, that we should think before we speak definitely applies to the case of a yogi, someone endeavoring on the path of self-realization. It could be any spiritual path, because no one wants to be around someone who's just a big gossip and is always putting someone else down, because you think, whoa, what do they say when I'm not around? We don't want to be that person. The positive way to engage the tongue is to talk about spiritual things, to talk about pleasant things, to talk about things that are in relationship to Vishnu, just like what I'm doing here. I could talk about all kinds of stuff, but the way that I can control my tongue is actually to engage it in a service that is higher than myself, in the service of yoga, in the service of bhakti yoga. The next thing or the previous thing, is the forces of the stomach. Now, this is not to suggest that we should not eat properly and that we should not eat at regulated times. This is saying that we should not overeat, that we should not eat on a whimsically, and most importantly, that we should actually eat prasadam. We should eat sanctified foods. We should try and eat foods that are in the mode of goodness, at least. Because what happens is that it's very hard to execute spiritual activities if you become a slave to your tongue. You overeat, you become sick, you become lethargic, but also the quality and the consciousness of which the food is prepared, that affects you, that affects your mentality, that actually affects your consciousness. Probably all of us have experienced having a meal prepared by someone who is in a bad mood, or you go to a restaurant and you can just tell that whoever was behind the decks that day didn't care and did a sloppy job, and you can taste it in the food. So being able to control the forces of the stomach is important, because in yoga you have the tongue, you have the stomach, and you have the genitals, and they are in order. So also overeating is putting pressure on your genitalia, which is creating another urge, right? There's that pressure, and that is forcing, or giving you the impetus just to overindulge in sex life. So again, like I said in my previous video, there's nothing wrong with sex life. However, when it becomes excessive because you haven't cleaned up your act, then it's going to be difficult for you to actually concentrate and think about higher things. Yogis in general try and conserve their sexual energy so they can use that energy and they can use that brain power to pursue higher things. Then it's the forces of the mind. If you can control the forces of the mind, this is a big thing. What do they say? Like the idle mind is the devil's workshop. So you want to endeavor to try and focus on the positive. Because when you start focusing on the negative, pretty soon your mind is dragging you down a pathway where despair and depression and sadness and all kinds of unsavory characteristics live and can drag you down. The mind is an extremely powerful thing. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says to Krishna when they're on the battlefield of Kurukshetra that it seems to me that the mind is stronger, it's as strong as the wind, that it is really, really hard to control. Who can control the mind? And Krishna says, you're right, it is hard to control. However, with suitable endeavor and practice, you can make your mind your friend instead of your enemy. So another way of looking at that is to understand that the mind is actually a sense organ. We don't usually think of the mind as being a sense organ, but it is an organ of perception. Just like you use the tongue to taste, you use the hands to touch, you use the ears to hear, you use the eyes to see, you use the nose to smell. The mind is also there and can perceive different subtleties. And the mind's function is to say yes or no. It is there to either accept or reject. But the mind, if not trained, is only going to accept and reject purely based on sensual impulses, which can get you in trouble. So, for example, my dog, he's adorable, but he's always interested in eating. Even if he's just eaten a full meal, he wants to eat again. He's being pushed by that. He doesn't really have the ability with his intelligence to control his mind and say, hey, mind, I'm the one in charge here. You just ate a full meal and got a treat as well. You're stuffed. I think you need to pull back here before you get sick and have to throw up. He doesn't have that ability. But we, as human beings, we do have that ability to be able to control our minds by implementing our intelligence. And our intelligence is shored up and is strengthened by examining and reading the principles of yoga, which can help us have a peaceful life. Of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be food. It could be an activity that you should be doing, maybe someone you need to stay away from, so forth. Everyone has got their little private Achilles heels and pitfalls, so I'll let you fill in the blanks there. But you don't just want to be pushed around by your mind. You want to be in control. You want your intelligence to be in control, because your intelligence is the next door neighbor of your soul. And the soul is the person that we are trying to spring from jail, as it were. Then, before that, the forces of anger. So this is actually related again to sensual impulses. Also, it can be related to a feeling of, I should have been honored. I should have been treated differently. I don't like the way I was treated, right? The false ego. And so we become angry. And when we become angry, things can become chaotic. We break things, we throw things, we start yelling and screaming. We may start accusing people of things that they didn't do. We may take things out on an innocent bystander. And here, specifically in this purport, it says that when we become angry, the mind, the eyes, and the chest become agitated. So if you've ever watched someone who becomes angry, their eyes are flashing, they're looking around, your chest can become tight, or maybe your chest is pounding because there's a lot of strong emotions running through there. Your mind just starts churning, right? You kind of go from one thing to the other, or maybe pulling up a litany of all the reasons why you're angry, and going through a whole laundry list of that. And for your friend or your spouse or anyone who's nearby who has to listen to the whole thing, it's pretty exhausting. And it's also exhausting to you itself. As a matter of fact, physiologically speaking, when you become angry, it actually pollutes the body. And next time you get angry, just take a moment, when after you calm down, and just check and see how you feel. How's your energy level? Is it high or is it low? Do you feel drained? Do you feel energized? I've noticed that when I lose my temper, and I mean really lose my temper, that I feel really wrung out afterwards. So all that sort of flashy energy is kind of a false one, and becoming angry is actually considered a form of sense gratification. Again, there is a time and a place for it, but sometimes you see people who kind of go on, and that it's kind of a fishing for attention, or there's a kind of an emptiness there. So anger can be a symptom of those things as well. Then there's the forces of talk. I'm going to go back to that. In this moment, I'm actually referring to gossip, or grumya kata. In general, I like to stay away from gossip because it's filled with a lot of speculation. You don't really know what you're talking about. You're just basically talking a lot of doo-doo about someone and something and a situation that you really have no idea about. And that's another thing that takes the mind and drags it in the gutter. So you want to try and stay away from gramya kata. Now, if you need to find something out, you can always do some logical research, or perhaps you can go nicely to the person if it's appropriate and ask them, or you can just wait it out, because chances are in the course of time the truth will come to the surface anyway. So all these pushes and pullings that keep us tied here and keep us unclear while we're swirling around the material energy is counterproductive to actually becoming self-realized. So these are some practical tools. So if you can do this before your deathbed, right, as you try and improve yourself on a daily basis or a weekly basis and work on these things, you will actually be situated in a happy state in this world and not be held back because you haven't graduated from class. So this is some of the coursework that a transcendentalist is trying to work on. So the mind can become peaceful, the atmosphere can become peaceful, so you can actually, again, hook in to that inner happiness, that transcendental happiness that is not dependent on any external circumstances. And when you get caught up in this type of thing, then suddenly you're thinking that your identity and your happiness is simply based on so-called happiness and distress of externals. So I'm going to leave you with that today. I think that this is a great thing to think about and a great thing to remember. The next time you feel like you're ready to fly off the handle, or someone is pushing you, or you feel like you're being pushed, just take a deep breath, take stock. Maybe you can excuse yourself and go outside. Just take a moment to calm down, or maybe at the end of the day, examine how your day went, what were the things that triggered you and why, and see if you can go through this checklist and see how you can mold your life so it can become more peaceful and you can become joyful and become a source of joy for others. Thank you so much for being with me here today, virtually. I look forward to seeing you again really soon. This is Akayani Music. This was Mantra Monday for Monday, January 27th, 2020. Peace.